You're about to see a really fun conversation that I had with a former psychology student of mine named Morgan Randall. Morgan is now a therapist who's working with a lot of teens on her caseload, a lot of young people in general. And I found it really fascinating to kind of compare notes with her about what we're noticing with young people in therapy, and also four things that we wish people knew before they started therapy. So, can't wait to share this conversation with you. And you will hear us talk about anxiety a lot because we just see how many young people are struggling with anxiety. So, as a reminder, I do have a signature anxiety program that can help you if you're struggling with anxiety. It's designed to help you move forward with the next steps in your education and friendships. And to access that program, the first step is to share a link with your parents. I put it in the pinned comment below and also the description. I have like kind of a free introductory video for parents where they learn 3 keys to help you with your anxiety. And they also get an introduction to my anxiety program so that they can enroll you if it seems like a good fit. So check that out, share that with your parents. And without further ado, here's the conversation with Morgan. Morgan, welcome to the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being our guest today. And I always provide a little bit of context for people before we actually dive into our conversation, especially for folks who maybe this is their first video that they're watching. So my name is Dr. Parke. My guest today is Morgan. And this conversation is actually going to be a little bit different than a lot of the ones we have on the YouTube channel, in the sense that Morgan is a therapist, a mental health professional. And so you're going to get to hear kind of inside our minds as therapists and what we think about regarding therapy. So this is a conversation between Morgan and I about those topics. This is not a therapy conversation in the sense that I am not Morgan's therapist. She's not my client. And so, yeah, Morgan, how do we know each other?
Well, thank you, Dr. Parke, for having me, first and foremost. I feel like we go way back. But yeah, several years, actually. You were actually a professor of mine during college. So when I was studying psychology at Vanguard University, you were one of my professors, I think for a few classes, actually. I at least recall 2 specifically. I think it's been the first time in a few years where we have crossed paths again. So I'm so excited to be here and rejoining you in this type of space.
Yeah, and I was so grateful that you said yes when I reached out and asked if you'd be willing to hop on a call with me. So I'm really grateful that that you're willing to do this. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And I mentioned at the beginning that you are a mental health professional. And can you give us a little context about where you're at with that in terms of your career?
Yes. So I am an associate marriage and family therapist. So a little bit of context of where I am in terms of my own practice is I'm a recent graduate student and I'm currently on the path of licensure. So I'm now working as a therapist at a local group in Orange County. And right now I'm really just building my caseload, finding out, what my niche is. I do have a passion for working with minors, so young people, children, adolescents, and teens. At this time, I want to say more than half of my caseload are teenagers, which is so fun, so I think fulfilling. I feel like working with young people is a gift. I feel like I learn a lot from them, and my hope is to help them kind of navigate all of the dynamics and challenges that adolescence and teenagehood bring. So it's kind of where I'm at this time.
Yeah. And thank you for the work that you're doing, because young people, like, they're just going through so much, right? Like adolescence, high school, even to college is just such a difficult time to begin with. And then I feel like this generation of folks is just up against some, I try not to use the word unprecedented anymore, so let me find a different word. They're just up against some forces that, like, no prior generation has had to grapple with. And so we just need good people like you who are willing to walk alongside young people and help raise them up, So thank you for being willing to do that.
Thank you.
What are some themes that you're noticing are coming up a lot with the young people that you work with in therapy?
That's such an important question. I think to narrow the themes, I would say, and I almost resonated with the unprecedented term that you use, because while it's a little bit varied than, I guess, what we were seeing a few years ago, the aftermath of that, it's like, what's coming next? Like, what's going to be the next big hurdle that this young generation is going to have to jump? But to boil it down, I think the topic of like perfectionism and overthinking, I guess anxiety in general, is a huge theme that a lot of my clients, and I think even teenagers outside of my caseload, battle every day, whether it's academic pressures, family pressures, societal expectations, family expectations. It's like the list almost continues. I think that is a very common one.
So anxiety, and then all these pressures from different forces, from society, from school, academic pressure, family. Sometimes when I'm talking with young people, some of them will be like, the pressure also comes from inside me, especially when it comes to perfectionism. It depends on the person, right? And then overthinking is a word that I notice people using a lot, and it's in therapy as well as in these YouTube conversations. And what I'm noticing too is people tend to say, I'm either overthinking or I'm underthinking. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the underthinking part. Like, I'm asking questions and being curious to understand that. I don't know, if someone were to say to you, I'm either overthinking about situations or I'm underthinking about them, would you have a guess what they mean by that? Because I need some help understanding it.
I think like the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear the term overthinking, I'm like, overthinking is how anxiety speaks to teens. It's literally like the brain is on this hamster wheel. It's kind of the image that I get. And it's working overtime to find certainty, to avoid embarrassment or rejection or whatever that fear is, which I'm happy to go into more in depth later. But when it comes to overthinking, I'm like, I envision the hamster wheel. Like, it doesn't know where it's going. It's just turning, getting exhausted. And versus the underthinking component, I don't know why, but avoidance comes to mind. Not sure if I maybe missed the mark on that for some folks, but underthinking almost relays this message of out of sight, out of mind. Like, okay. not giving it the brain power or the space to acknowledge it.
Okay. I could see that. And I mean, of course, it just depends on the person what they mean by that. But I could see underthinking being related to avoidance. Like, I'm just going to sweep this under the rug, out of sight, out of mind. It's not there. And if I don't face it, it's not there. And if I don't think about it, it's not there. And then we know that that actually makes anxiety worse in the long run. Well, I promised in the title of this video that we would talk about what therapists wish people knew before they started therapy. And we chatted a bit before I hit record about 2 ideas that you have and 2 ideas that I have. So I would like to start with your first idea. I'm looking at my notes, but yeah, just to cue this up a little bit, you talked about like you wish people knew that therapy is not necessarily about like fixing them. So can you help us understand that?
Mm-hmm. And I imagine that some listeners that might have heard you say that, like, what do you mean therapy is not about fixing me? Why am I going then? Let me elaborate.
Why? Because you think people, they're like, I want to be fixed. You're not doing your job or something?
Perhaps. I was imagined like this listener, like, what does she mean?
WTF? Fix me.
Yes, exactly. And I wanted to preface this thought by saying, like, a lot of people pursue therapy with this desire of having this big Dr. Phil moment. Like, I'm fixed. It happened. My problems are over, and it happened so quickly in the matter of an episode or a session. And while that's beautiful, and I mean, that would be an amazing thing if it happened that easy and quick. But I feel like the reality of therapy is not necessarily about fixing you. It's about understanding you. And I wish more people knew that therapy is more about understanding, discovering, and accepting ourselves. Those deep internalized, shoved down wounds or past experiences that we don't touch. It's like that's a part of your story. And oftentimes they demand to be felt. So I believe like true growth in therapy happens not because you become someone new, a whole other new person, but because you start showing up more fully as yourself. You begin to heal those deep, untouched parts of yourself.
So when I'm done with therapy, will I be perfect?
I will venture to say, nope.
Okay. I was joking. Hopefully that was clear. But you have a really beautiful way of articulating that, right? That like the therapy process is one where it's not about fixing someone. And I would even say people don't need to be fixed and don't like to be fixed, even if they think that that's what they want. We don't like to be treated as a project, right? We like to be treated as people and seen and heard and known and loved as people. And part of that is understanding ourselves and accepting ourselves and, as you said, showing up more authentically as who we are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. All right. Anything more that you want to say about that one before I share an idea?
I don't think so, but a thought might come up after you share yours.
Okay. So one idea that I have as a therapist that I wish people knew this before starting therapy is that you can shop around. And I would even say you should shop around. And what I mean by that is that you might find one particular therapist that you're really excited to work with. You found their website or whatever, and you're like, this is my person. Starting therapy with someone, I don't want to make it sound more daunting than it is, but it is a decision where like you should think through some main pieces of that decision. Like, is this person going to be a good fit for you? which you can get a feel for that either in like a consultation call ahead of time or maybe in a first session. Is the scheduling going to work out between you? How is this going to work in terms of the finances of things? Is this going to be in person? Is this going to be online? I'm really thinking through, are you able to make a commitment that's at least a couple weeks, depending on the therapist and the type of therapy? It could be a couple months, it could be a couple years, but just trying to think through those pieces, because sometimes I do think people jump impulsively into therapy without thinking through all those. And then they get like a couple weeks or a couple months into the process and they're like, oh, for these XYZ reasons, I can't continue. And so think those through. And when I say shop around, what I mean is it's totally okay to contact a few therapists, have a consultation call with a few of them, or even have a first session with a few of them and just say in the session, hey, just to let you know, like, I'm having a first session with a few therapists, and afterward, like, I'll let you know whether or not I want to continue with you or if I've chosen someone else. And that's for everyone's benefit, because therapists want to work with people who are a good fit for them, that they can truly benefit, that they can truly help them make progress. And so if as a client, you can tell that they're not a good fit for you, or like whatever the case may be, like decide that super early on rather than, later or whatever. So what do you think about this, Morgan?
I couldn't agree more. I think it also kind of ties into what my next point will be, but I definitely want to normalize that pursuing therapy is a huge investment in yourself. It's a huge investment in the past you, the present you, and the future you. So feeling comfortable, almost, I don't want to say curating the space, but finding a good fit who maybe is familiar working with your specific situation, or who, I don't know, it can really boil down to something as simple as like you feel comfy going to their office, and it's a great transition space to like, okay, I'm here. I like being here. This office is cozy, so on and so forth. But the simple things really play into the investment of the therapy process for you. So I love how you put that.
Yeah. And it really is a goodness of fit thing. Whether, like you said, like you feel comfortable in someone's office, hopefully you don't show up and they have like, I don't know, I was thinking of funny scenarios in my mind, but now they've left my mind. I don't know. They have like a cactus farm on one wall. You might be like, oh, that's a little too prickly for me. I'm not feeling warm and relaxed and at ease, or if it's online, right? That you feel a goodness of fit with the connection with the person, with their level of attentiveness, with their nonverbals. Every therapist is different with that. And so like, I think ideally we would live in a world where there's always this goodness of fit between therapist and client, with, of course, with flexibility for the fact that we are all human, especially therapists are human. And I think people kind of can forget that sometimes because we can seem intimidating, I think.
Somehow.
Yeah, but us therapists are human and we want to work with people who want to work with us. And so let's find that goodness of fit. And if we're not a good fit, like, please, as someone who is seeking therapy, like find someone who's a good fit for you, who will serve you the best.
Yeah.
Okay, Morgan, you had a point for us about, and this is totally related, so it's a good segue, just the importance of the therapeutic relationship. What do you wish people knew about that before they started therapy?
So your relationship with your therapist is part of therapy. Mic drop. I'm just kidding. to really tie in what you just shared, Dr. Park, about finding the good fit, or rather a good fit, shopping around, I think a really key benefit to that is finding a therapist who you click with. So I'm like really prefacing that because the therapeutic relationship is a huge agent for your growth. How will they challenge you? How do they sit with you? How do they get you to explore things? What interventions do they use? What do they specialize in? That all embodies the therapeutic process. But first and foremost, building that trusted relationship is like stop one.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's not just about what you talk about in the room. It's also about the dynamic between you and your therapist. That relationship often serves as a mirror or a rehearsal space, or sometimes for a lot of people, it's a space where a person may experience being seen, like fully seen or accepted, either for the first time or in a long time. So it's very much like a valued relationship, not just for the client too, but also for the therapist and like the work that they're able to do as well.
Okay, so the relationship is key. And we tend to say like the therapeutic relationship is the foundation of everything that happens in therapy. And you mentioned trust, and I think you also implied like safety as well. And just that this relationship is kind of the catalyst for the ways in which someone's growth and their change and their self-acceptance can happen over time. And I think that underscores like a lot of what we've already talked about too, right? About like find someone who's a good fit with the understanding that no therapist is going to be perfect. And actually, we all make mistakes as well. So, but yeah, the relationship is key for sure.
Yeah. And a thought popped into my mind as soon as you said that about therapists are human. We miss the mark. We might not catch on to something. We might challenge you in either something that doesn't resonate or we completely miss you in that moment. And I think speaking to a really healthy therapeutic relationship is being able to tell your therapist, like, no, that's not quite it. Or, what you just did right there, it kind of opened up something for me, or that made me uncomfortable, or I didn't like what you said. Like being able to feel comfortable and welcomed to really, I guess, speak your mind.
Mm-hmm. That's such a great point, Morgan. It reminded me of like, there's moments in therapy where I can tell that I have a really solid, respectful, trusting relationship with someone if they push back on me a little bit. And what I mean by that is sometimes as a therapist, we're kind of like, reading between the lines about something you share with us. And sometimes I might pick up on emotions that I feel like either the person in therapy isn't aware of, or they just don't want to say it. Like they might actually be mad, right? And they don't want to say that they're mad, or they might be feeling shame, but they haven't used that word. So I might be listening and kind of, I'm taking a bit of a leap to say like, I'm wondering if you felt shame afterward when that happened. And when people push back on me a little bit and they say, what's that shame? I don't really think so. There's multiple possibilities, right? It's possible that they did feel shame, but they're so ashamed that they don't want to say that just yet and they're not ready. So I hold that possibility. But if they really didn't feel shame and they're willing to let me know that, even though I asked a kind of leading question, like, I think that's a good thing because they're kind of telling me that I was off. It's to your point, like, if they can let me know, like, yeah, I don't really know. I don't think I was angry with my mom. It's like, it feels like a really cool space to be in therapy, where I can kind of try out ideas and float things to people or suggest things or plant seeds. And then they're really coming to the table to kind of co-create that with me and be like, yeah, I really resonate with these pieces, but this piece, I mean, not so much.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything more you want to say about the importance of the relationship before I share my second point?
Like, go for it. I think so far it's been such a good conversation.
Okay. Well, I feel like my second point, which will be kind of our last main point here that we're going to chat about, relates to the importance of the therapy relationship. I think those of us who've been doing this work for decades will probably know what I mean when I say this, but my last point is don't disappear. And it's sort of an accepted thing in the world of therapy and among therapists that people who've been in therapy do disappear. And this happens for multiple reasons. It happens because ideally, like the best scenario is that someone's getting better in therapy and they're making progress, and maybe they're just gaining so much momentum and they're on such a positive path that they kind of feel like they don't need the therapy anymore. But they can disappear for that reason. They can also disappear because maybe the therapist was off about something or made a mistake or misspoke, like we just talked about, right? That those things happen. And it's actually the working through of those things that can be very therapeutic as well. But we miss out on that opportunity when someone disappears instead. There's certainly a lot of other reasons why someone can disappear. Like maybe they need to move out of state. Maybe they're just super stressed. Maybe the therapist has like approached something that's just too painful. They're not ready to address that. Maybe it's a kind of a self-sabotage type of thing to not show up at therapy anymore. Sometimes when we work with young people, I hate to say it, but especially with teenagers, sometimes there is a parent or a family member who sabotages the therapy. Like that's a difficult truth right there, But all of this to say, if it's possible for you as someone who's seeking therapy to have a good goodbye, that is the ideal. And I think it's really rare in therapy that happens. I have experienced that with people, but I think it's the exception. Even though we're kind of in grad school, we're trained to kind of do that. And we have a terrible, intimidating word for it, which is termination.
Oh, yes.
It always reminds me of like the Terminator, right?
Oh, 100%.
Why would we pick such a terrible, cold word for like a good goodbye? But
right.
Instead of saying don't disappear, I think a better way that I could probably say this is like, have a good goodbye if you can. And it's super weird and awkward because we don't usually do that in life, but it's actually a good practice to have some closure if you are needing to end therapy for whatever reason. So that's my TED Talk. Thank you for being here. What are your thoughts on this, Morgan?
Again, I wholeheartedly agree. I think as you were talking, I was almost thinking about my previous experiences with clients, and you were right. It's like I feel like most, from what I can recall, were pretty abrupt. At least terminations or our farewells. Mm-hmm. They happen a lot of times very surprisingly. I think, especially as a person who works with minors, parents are a huge factor. And not in like a truly negative way, but it's like, oh, well, sports are starting, summer's starting, school's ending, and insert reason here. But like that is such a common experience, at least for me. And I think if I could choose the way it goes, I think I would want to spend a session processing, like, what is it like to not have this one-on-one space moving forward? Or what did you like about this process? What didn't you like? Like, if you were to start again in the future, what might make you want to come or go? Making it specific to teens, like I feel like my response is super specific to young people who are almost at the mercy of external factors. Making it theirs. So, like, by them coming, this isn't necessarily their parents' therapeutic process, it's theirs. And I think that gives them a lot of control and agency by being able to process their experience with them, which would be great if it happened like that more seamlessly, more often.
Yeah, may it be the case. We're trying to create a world where there's less diffuse, like, grief, like less diffuse unresolved endings, right? Like, what's the word for that? Loose ends.
Yes.
Because sometimes people come into therapy with a lot of loose ends, a lot of abrupt endings. And so, if at all humanly possible, like, let's actually have a good goodbye so that we're not just another loose end in their life. And I absolutely see what you're talking about too, with families where it's like, oh, well, this sport is starting or this extracurricular is coming in. It's a really busy season for our family, or summer's starting. We have all these vacations. If you're a parent and you're listening to this, what I would say is, like, as therapists, we totally understand that there's seasons for your family where therapy is a good fit or not a good fit. But, like, ask the therapist, like, maybe for a final session, like Morgan was saying. So consider that, like, your kid might want some closure and a chance to just have a final session with this therapist to talk about, like, as you said, Morgan, like, what is it going to be like to not have this one-on-one connection anymore? What might this upcoming season look like for them? When might they come back into therapy? When might they not? Sometimes we talk about, like, what have you learned in therapy, and, like, how is that going to help you in this upcoming busy season or this wonderful vacation you're going on? And sometimes, if there's room for this level of vulnerability too, we can talk about what will you miss, what will you not miss from therapy, like, what were you grateful for? What do you wish had been different about therapy? And all of that is a way of kind of creating closure. And I really hesitated to bring this up as my last point of, like, the don't disappear thing, but, like, because I was like, am I saying this out of self-interest? And I think, having been in this field for decades now, what I would say is, like, everyone matters in the therapy relationship. So that means that the people coming in for therapy are people. The therapist is also a people. And if we truly value the relationship and all the people in the room, I think this would be the ideal to have a final session or a good goodbye.
That was well said. And
therapists are people.
We care. Yes. Excuse me.
Yeah, but I'm also saying it, I don't know, I'm just looking at it too as, like, someone who's taught psychology students and now they're becoming therapists. And I've done supervision and mentored people over the years as well. And I think it's for the benefit of the field and the long-term sustainability of therapists that they not have so many loose ends either. Because certainly I think most of us listening to this would probably say we want good therapists out there who can be available for the long term to work with folks.
Absolutely.
And that's my bias, and I'm sticking to it.
I've adopted it.
Okay. Well, I do have a final question that I tend to ask people, Morgan, but before I ask my final question, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to share? Yeah, just kind of opening it up to you if there's anything else you'd like to say or ask.
I feel like Pandora's box just opened. I think, pondering. If I could encourage, I guess, parents, in the sense that parents are watching this, or I guess young people who are interested or curious about therapy, to normalize the conversation about exploring what starting therapy could look like. I feel like a lot of times when I'm beginning the process of starting with a client, I really like to collaborate and bring in the parents to help normalize, like, hey, like, going back to the very first point, we're not changing or fixing this individual. We are expanding a skill set. We're expanding an inventory. We're providing more tools in their tool belt or toolbox. And I think emphasizing that therapy it could be daunting, but like all of the, I guess, the benefit or the
juicy goodness.
What was that?
The juicy goodness of therapy.
The juicy goodness, yes. Yeah, it's the outcome. It's a beautiful process, and I forgot where I was going with the encouragement part, but encouraging parents to be open to hearing the conversation. If your child or teen is curious or asking questions, shop around and make it a process you guys maybe do together. Get to know a good fit and get the juicy goodness from the process. I've never heard that before, but I love it.
I just made it up on the spot. I'm sorry if my inappropriate interjection got you off track, but
I was like,
I love that. It just made it up. But I love that encouragement for parents and for families, and that can be a collaborative process of like a parent and their kid shopping around and looking at different therapists, connecting with different therapists, kind of making a decision in the end on one. And also a collaborative process, like you said, at the beginning of therapy, especially for teens and parents as well. I think too, what I would tell parents, you give me this idea and what you were sharing, but I would tell parents, if your kid is asking for therapy or needing therapy, it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong as a parent. It doesn't mean that you're a failure as a parent. And I'm saying that because I've heard that from so many parents. Like, you can be an amazing parent. You can work so hard from the beginning of this kid's life to provide everything for them that they need, maybe everything that you didn't have. And we just know that we live in a really difficult world where things happen that are not a parent's fault. And I even kind of look at it sometimes like this is more like a mythological type of view. But if you think of like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or some of these other epic journeys, but like the hero has to go on a journey, right? And part of the hero going on a journey is that they struggle and they get lost in the woods. They can't find their way. They need a guide. And if that hero is like a teen or college student, what I'm trying to say is sometimes it's normal that they get lost in the woods or that they struggle, and they can come out of that with juicy goodness, with some gold that they mine through the process and be transformed as well. Not fixed, but transformed.
I like that.
More themselves, more deeply themselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
good.
Yeah. So I guess it's also my way for to say to parents, like, don't take it personally if you've got a beloved young person in your family who's asking for therapy, like, just connect them if you can, if you have access to be able to do that. And if you can't access therapy, usually because like insurance doesn't cover it or financial reasons or time, scheduling, whatever, like, consider that there are low-cost options for therapy, and there's other options as well. If your kid is struggling with something like anxiety or depression, like, there's a lot of apps out there. There's group therapy. There's programs online, right? Like, I have an anxiety program for this reason. Tons of other programs out there. And just consider that, like, mental health doesn't need to equal therapy, and that's the only answer. So Morgan and I are obviously in love with therapy, but that's our jobs.
A little biased, but
a little bit. Yeah.
I support and second all of those other resources as well too.
Yeah. I think we need a blended approach. Like, we have a youth mental health epidemic right now, and not everyone can have a one-on-one therapist because even mathematically, there's not that many therapists in the universe. So let's take a creative blended approach to helping people move forward with their mental health.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to hop off my soapbox here, Morgan, and ask you my final question. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. Final question is, what do you wish you knew when you were younger?
So many things. This is such a good question. I think for the sake of also trying to relate with others who might be listening, if I could tell my younger self something, it would be that your worth isn't tied to achievement, that your good enough efforts are good enough, and your work is, or I guess your level of hard work that you can give is enough. And I think this really ties into that theme of perfectionism for a lot of people, especially my younger self as well, who kind of tied self-worth to achievement or successes. My 10-year-old self wanting to get A's on everything when that just kind of wasn't in the cards at the time, but that's what was celebrated. Like those, sorry, there's a motorcycle passing. It might be loud. There's this perceived expectation, I think, like if you meet other people's expectations, you get praised. Or if you make a mistake, there's big consequence. And I think that as a young person really festers and almost continues throughout life. And it kind of presents itself in all areas, academically, relationally, occupationally, like at a job. So yeah, I think to tell my younger self that your worth and goodness is not tied to that, tied to those things, that your efforts are good enough. I think that's what I would say. Or if I could know that, that's what I would want to know.
Your good enough efforts are good enough. Your worth is not tied to your achievements or other people's expectations or other people's approval or opinions of you. Powerful stuff. Morgan, thank you for being here. Thanks for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parke.
Our worth is not tied to our achievements, and it's also not tied to other people's opinions of us, expectations of us, or their thoughts of us. Your good enough efforts are good enough. Thank you, Morgan, for sharing such a powerful perspective with us. And if you're someone who's resonated with this conversation and you are struggling with anxiety, remember that there's a link below for that introductory training about my signature anxiety program.